DNA has the power to crack even the coldest, hardest-to-solve cases. It can turn suspicion into certainty and bring long-awaited justice to those who have suffered the unthinkable. This case is an example of it. For nearly 2 decades, one man lingered in the shadows of suspicion, his name whispered in connection with other unsolved horrors. But it wasn't until 2017 that investigators finally had enough to bring him in: a DNA match. His dark past is filled with unanswered questions and unsolved disappearances, but this case proves one thing: even when closure feels impossible, the relentless pursuit of justice is worth it. Welcome to The Haunt 329. Today, we'll be looking at the case of Charles Holifield. But before that, please consider subscribing if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel. Now, let's get into the breathtaking case. Today's episode takes place on California's north-central Monterey Peninsula along the Pacific coast. Pebble Beach Golf Course and Monterey Bay Aquarium are among the greatest in the nation. John Steinbeck, a Salinas native, was famous. About 53,000 people lived on the peninsula in 2000. U.S. Army Base Fort Ord closed in 1994 as part of a national cost-cutting effort. Fort Ord's 28,000 acres were 2/3 rugged, undeveloped, and open. Most of that acreage went to UC Santa Cruz, and the rest was returned to the state for public use. After the facility ended, hundreds of military families moved there, but thousands of structures were boarded up. Charles Holifield, born January 10, 1961, was raised at Fort Ord by his Army Sergeant father. Charles last appeared in Seaside High School's 1978 yearbook as a junior and committed his first sexual assault as a senior. Charles, 18, jumped his 17-year-old classmate DB from behind on a Fort Ord bike route between Marina and Seaside on May 29, 1979. DB, a thin, 5-foot-tall girl with straight brown hair, was young. Charles flung DB, choked her, and held her with a knee. When she requested him to throw away his knife because it scared her, he did. Charles pulled down DB's pants and underwear but failed to penetrate her and demanded oral sex. Instead of fighting, Charles stopped when DB refused. DB agreed to help him recover his knife and stroll with him. DB said she attended Seaside High and Fitch Middle School. Charles stated he knew her from school and that they shared teachers. They also discussed music and discovered they both liked the Beatles. After Charles allowed DB to go home, she looked up his name in her yearbook and reported the assault to police. Charles joined the Army and began basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky. He was returned to California to Fort Ord's military quarters for assault with intent to rape. Less than 6 months after his first assault, Charles Holifield ambushed a 14-year-old girl coming home through Fort Ord on a shortcut. She was short and skinny like DB, with straight brown hair. Charles assaulted her behind Marshall Park Elementary School and chatted about school until sirens alerted him to flee. 2 weeks after an attack, a girl saw Charles Holifield at the Fort Ord Library and reported it to her Army Specialist father, who informed military authorities. They found incriminating evidence in Charles' possessions, but didn't press charges, as he was already charged for another assault. Charles was convicted and imprisoned for 19 months in January 1980, insisting he was innocent and framed. In 1982, Charles was paroled and required to register as a sex offender. After his release, 20-year-old Jennifer Morris disappeared in January 1983 during a shopping trip and was found dead near Del Monte Shopping Center in 2011. Despite suspicions, her case remains unsolved. 3 months after Jennifer's disappearance, Charles, then 22, abducted and raped 14-year-old DJ in Pacific Grove. After tying her up and driving her to a forested area, DJ talked to Charles about God and convinced him to take her to the Salvation Army. He later confessed to the crime and was sentenced to 17 years for rape and kidnapping in June 1983, his only guilty plea. Charles was paroled in 1992 after serving half his sentence. By 1996, he was dating Linda Silver and Lisa Johnson, splitting his time between them. Charles sexually and physically abused both ladies. A third conviction under California's 3-strike statute would mean 20 to life in prison after 2 major felonies. Charles threatened to kill both women if he got a third strike, saying he could bury their bodies. Lisa Johnson said Charles choked her with her clothes for a minute and anally raped her after consensual sex in 1996. Charles anally raped her again at night in 1997. Charles reacted violently when Lisa left. Between January and March 1997, police reacted to many domestic violence cases. Charles was sentenced to 30 days for battery after Lisa filed a restraining order against him, but they reconciled despite the violence. A local newspaper distributed Megan's Law flyers in June 1997, identifying Charles as a repeat sex offender and exposing his address. Charles became homeless after losing his job and residence. Besides staying in his vehicle and motorhome, he remained with Lisa at her mother's apartment or his sister's mobile home. Charles was hired by a Sand City cabinet maker in August 1997 after his brother referred him. Within a year, the warehouse parking lot owner let Charles reside in his car. At his brother's seaside home, Charles stayed near where a 13-year-old Ekaterina Sherbakova disappeared on April 5, 1998. In 2010, cold case investigators suspected Charles of her abduction because of Katie's physical resemblance to Charles' other victims. Katie attended Fitch Middle School with 13-year-old Christina Williams, who had just moved to Seaside in November 1997. Christina's father, Michael Williams, was a meteorologist for the U.S. Navy, leading the family to move frequently. Michael met his wife, Alice, in the Philippines in 1979. They had a daughter, Jennifer, in 1980, and moved to Hawaii. Their son, Michael Jr., was born in 1982, and the family moved to Japan, where Christina was born on May 1, 1985. California was Christina's first big move, but she adjusted well despite missing her friends in Japan. She joined her new school's chorus and kept good grades. Her family described her as close to perfect, innocent, courteous, conscientious, hardworking, and reliable. She spent a lot of time online, but always asked permission before joining chat rooms. Christina liked pop music, especially Mariah Carey, and her favorite movie was My Best Friend's Wedding. She wanted to see Titanic with her dad before it left theaters. For Christmas 1997, Christina got an aquarium with angelfish and proved to be an exceptional pet owner. She told her parents she wanted to become a veterinarian. For her birthday in May, she adopted a dog, a collie and Australian Shepherd mix named Greg. Christina took full responsibility for Greg's care, often walking him on Fort Ord's trails and bike paths. She favored a loop behind her home on Nijmegen Road that took 15 to 20 minutes to complete. On June 12, 1998, around 7:30 p.m., Christina took Greg for a walk. Her mother was napping, her brother was playing computer games, her father was at a work event, and her sister was with her boyfriend. Around 8 p.m., her 16-year-old brother, Michael Jr., noticed Christina hadn't returned. He woke their mother, Alice, who searched the house while Michael Jr. looked for Christina on his bike. They found Greg walking nearby with his leash trailing. Michael reported Christina's disappearance to police by 8:45 p.m. Officers initially told the family to wait 24 hours, assuring them Christina would likely return soon. Unhappy with this response, Michael called his base commander, mobilizing volunteers and involving the FBI since Christina went missing on recently federal property. He also contacted 3 non-profit organizations specializing in searching for missing children. Alice said, "That's when the police started moving seriously, and the media came." The local police chief quickly listed Christina as a missing person abduction case and requested a search dog. Despite official searches and Michael and Greg combing nearby trails, some officers suspected Christina had run off after a girl resembling her was seen at a 7-Eleven that night. However, her family insisted this was out of character. The Monterey County community rallied behind the Williams family, with hundreds of volunteers joining the search. A tracking dog traced Christina's scent to a wooded area, but lost it. The reward for information, bolstered by local fundraising and the FBI, reached $100,000. Celebrities like Clint Eastwood and Mariah Carey contributed to the reward and filmed public service announcements, while local baseball teams and media outlets kept the case in the public eye. Eyewitnesses soon reported sightings of 2 men in a primer gray car near Fort Ord, leading to sketches being released. Other witnesses describe similar sightings of two men, possibly Hispanic or Asian, in an older model Mercury Monarch or Ford Granada. Investigators struggled with conflicting details and over 6,000 matching vehicles. Despite receiving over 10,000 tips over the next 20 years, including one from America's Most Wanted that led to a follow-up in North Carolina, the case remained unsolved. In 2006, John Walsh suggested focusing on registered sex offenders, leading the FBI to interview all 576 offenders and 800 parolees in the area, including Charles Holifield. When agents visited his last known address on July 14, 1998, they found he had failed to register his new location and was living in an RV at his workplace. A search of his RV and truck turned up nothing suspicious. Charles couldn't recall his whereabouts on June 12th. His employer said Charles left early to view an apartment but didn't return to work. Lisa Johnson confirmed they had an appointment that evening but missed it. She claimed Charles arrived at her mother's place around 6:30 p.m., which her mother backed up, but this contradicted what Lisa told a friend that night. The apartment owner, Rick Stemple, recalled Charles and Lisa arguing on June 13th about his whereabouts the previous night. On August 7th, 1998, Charles was arrested for failing to register his address but was released on bail. A month later, he attempted to kidnap Melanie Paget, who escaped and identified him. After his arrest, Charles gave his truck to Lisa, who quickly sold it, preventing an FBI search. Christmas 1998 marked 6 months since Christina Williams went missing and her family's first without her. Weeks later, on January 12, 1999, botanist Erica Murphy discovered skeletal remains in a nature reserve in Fort Ord, 3 miles from Christina's home. Dental records confirmed the remains as Christina's 2 days later, on her mother's birthday. Christina's remains were found in 2 locations, likely scattered by animals, with no clear cause of death determined. Charles Holifield became the prime suspect due to his criminal record, alibi issues, and familiarity with the area where Christina's remains were discovered. In March 1999, the FBI tested Christina's underwear for semen, but found none. By June 1st, 1999, Charles was convicted of Melanie Paget's attempted kidnapping and sentenced to 27 years to life. A 2009 FBI raid on his brother's home, searching for alibi-related letters, turned up a marijuana operation instead. Charles's father condemned the investigation as a witch hunt, but privately expressed shame, saying Charles deserved the death penalty, if guilty. In 2002, Charles admitted he stayed with Lisa Johnson so she would advocate for him. Lisa later claimed the FBI framed Charles and tried to coerce her into lying, but insisted she wouldn't defend him if she believed he was guilty. The FBI case agent denied these allegations, stating he only explained the legal consequences of lying under oath, which might have been perceived as threatening. In September 2011, after Jennifer Morris's remains were found, police suspected Charles in her murder and re-interviewed Lisa about Christina Williams' case. She initially stuck to her testimony but later recanted, claiming Charles had threatened her and her family to provide an alibi. In 2016, new DNA evidence linked Charles to Christina's murder, leading to a 1 in 46 octillion match. He was charged with first-degree murder and kidnapping with intent to commit rape in April 2017, but pled not guilty. Monterey County sought the death penalty, but in 2019, a deal was made to remove it in exchange for Charles waiving his right to a jury trial and most appeals. The trial began on March 2, 2020, with the defense offering alternative theories and Lisa Johnson testifying Charles was with her on the day of the crime. Despite COVID-19 restrictions, the trial continued, and on March 20th, Charles was found guilty on all counts, receiving 2 life sentences without parole, plus an additional 52 years. Charles maintains his innocence, but investigators believe he abducted, raped, and murdered Christina Williams, fearing she would identify him as her attacker. Her death could have been his 3rd strike, and if not for another victim's escape, she might have been his next murder victim. Christina's father, Michael Williams, echoes John Walsh's sentiment that closure is a myth. After the guilty verdict, he said, "It's not final closure, because we'll never get our daughter back. But at least now, we don't have to worry about who did it." he still can't watch Titanic, knowing Christina never had the chance. A plaque near where Christina's remains were found honors her memory, urging everyone to prevent such tragedies. Navy volunteers maintain the memorial. Christina's parents now help other families find missing children, inspired by John Walsh, who started America's Most Wanted after losing his son. Ekaterina Sherbakova, Christina's schoolmate, is still missing, and while investigators suspect Charles in her case and Jennifer Morris's, he hasn't been charged. What's your opinion on this case? I would like to know your view on this case in the comment section. Till then, take care and keep watching The Haunt 329.